deferral of capital gains. And just out of curiosity, I started to study it. And the more I went down the rabbit hole, the more interested I became and started to really network in the space. It was interesting because people in the brokerage community were asking me, how do you get paid in it? And I really didn't know at the time. And that was the crazy part about it. But I felt something within me. And then it's really become the whole social impact piece is what really grabbed my attention and said, I want to play in this sandbox. Net lease is good, 1031 exchanges is good, but it was just more transaction based. And I saw this opportunity to use a lot more skills than I was using in that net lease space. And so that's how I started. The issues with the OZ1 is that it was it was a tax incentive which got a lot of criticism because they thought it was another loophole for wealthy investors. So there was a lack of education and transparency. And then COVID came and that slowed it down. And then the interest rates went up 500 basis points, and you had three big banks blow up. So that really, the key piece of this, the tax incentive, is you're trying to attract private capital. This isn't tax incentives from the federal or state governments. This is private capital that you're trying to spur to come in these projects, and that's a job in itself to try and find that capital. But so the market slowed down. Then fast forward, 2026 is when the first round of capital gains will be due, and everyone in the industry that believed in it were trying to get this made permanent. And so 2025, 4th of July, President Trump signed into the big, beautiful bill to make the OZs permanent. So we call it OZ2. The OZ2 doesn't go into effect until January 1st of 2027. So we have a little runway. The big first thing will be the designation of the opportunity zones itself, and that's going to be more competitive. They'll start that in July, approximately this time next year. The governors will pick. They'll have a 30-day, kind of review. But this will be the most important first step of creating the Opportunity Zones 2.0. And I can get more into that, but I'll just stop there. I think that was a long-winded introduction.
No, Mike, thank you so much. Because I know everyone heard about it. Everyone heard about the Jobs Act to stimulate the economy, create opportunities, especially the jobs. EB-5 is also one of them, right? Like the
Yeah,
OZs. So if there are different programs out there, the problem is a lot of times they're complex. People don't understand them. Bad
right.
information's out there. What would you say that's a simple way of, because a lot of times we look at deals and we say the deals have to stand alone, regardless,
Yeah.
right, of the OZs. So can you tell me some of the simple parameters for people to know about how to find a deal that fits into the OZ?
Right. Well, you touched on something that, the OZ incentive doesn't make a bad deal good. It enhances the returns on a well underwritten deal. And I think the thing where, brokers and service providers probably are not in tuned or, weren't made aware of this is that at the end of the day, it's still traditional real estate brokerage and investment. And and it's driven by the sponsors or the investors doing these deals within the census tract. The OZs are census tracts. There was over 8,700 in OZ1. That's going to be reduced in OZ2. It's going to be much more competitive. So if you think of it as a service provider, the intermediaries that most of us are, is you can either represent the developer to find these sites to develop within OZs, and then also businesses. I expect you're going to see a lot more businesses be attracted to leveraging the OC incentives. So it could be site selection as well around the country.
And Mike, is it only for development deals or could you reposition, tear down? Does it have to have a development component, or is it more of a located in a economic more distress? And we've known in the OZ1 path of progress, and sometimes you're right, the map showed some areas that the city or county didn't come up with it. And we're like, this is an opportunity zone area, using the map.
Right.
And it was obviously more prosperous than what this was intended.
Yeah.
So, with that map, like you said, is it going to be adjusted quicker? So where's the opportunity, right, from the map? And is it
Mm,
only development deals? Is it tear
no.
down,
Yep.
positioning, and like you said, businesses?
Yeah. So it's a great question, Jim. So when the first designation of zones came across, it went to the governors and their panels, agencies, cities, and mayors to designate up to 25 low-income census tracts, 25%. I won't get into what that metric is. I don't think that's as important for this conversation. So, but each state was allowed to designate 25% of their low census tracts. And the part that really became clear is in the rural census tracts. A lot of rural census tracts were designated, but they weren't going to attract investment dollars with or without this tax incentive. So that's a was what I consider a big mulligan. And so there's going to be a lot of attention on rural zones because they've improved the tax incentive in OZ2 dramatically, and I'm really excited about that. Going back to original zones, yeah, there were zones and there was contiguous zones. A lot of these core urban cities that we're seeing development already. People thought that was just a loophole for wealthy developers and investors to go into these zones. So there was a little truth to that, but there was no reporting, there was no measurement of OZ1s initially, but now there's a lot of data behind it, and there's been billions of dollars that have gone into these OZ census tracts. The big play that this is good for this audience to think about is, one, we've got a runway to kind of scope out where these zones may or may not be. Some of the existing zones are going to be there, but there's going to be new designations. And so, will these zones be in the path of progress, or will there be businesses that you can attract to a rural zone because of energy infrastructure? There's a variety of things you're going to be able to look at in advance. The most important part is if you've got relationships with your senators and congressmen and governors and municipalities, is to get involved in the conversation. Your knowledge and information could be critical in someone designating a zone. The big thing about rural that they've made it very attractive is there's a thing called a basis step up. And so in OZ1 right now, we're winding down. So the deferral mechanism isn't as, it's not juiced up right now, but becoming January 1st, 2027, your step up in basis for rural zones will be 30%. So after 5 years, you'll have to pay your capital gains, but you only pay 70%. The other piece too is that, and the rule goes back to from OZ1, is that if you bought land and you did development, then you were clear. But if you took an existing building and rehab, you had to invest 100% of the basis of that building. So an example, if the property, was $1 million, you'd have to improve it up to $2 million to be in compliance. Here in rural, one, you get the 30% basis step up, but you only have to improve property by 50%, which is dramatic. And I can speak for experience that there are a lot more businesses. When it first started, it was weighted maybe 85%, 90%, maybe even higher towards residential real estate primarily. And now though the expectation is that these zones will be used to attract businesses. So when businesses come, there's ancillary opportunities from housing to convenience retail. There are other things that you could do around one of these big manufacturing plants that might be going in somewhere.
Mike, with all the money coming in, and a lot of times in the rural area, right, it's a lot of storage, manufacturing, industrial warehouses. Obviously,
Yeah.
those are some of the hottest products. And with all this onshoring and business coming back to America, I mean, I'm in calls Asia, Europe, Latin
Yeah.
America, everyone's trying to find land, find opportunities. Could foreign investors and other partners use OZ, or is it only for domestic participants to use this program?
For the tax incentive, yes, it's U.S. based citizens. F- there could be, I'm not the expert on the tax and compliance, but there I think are some provisions for foreign investors. The fact is, anyone can invest in these deals. It's just the question: will you be the recipient benefit of the tax incentive? And so the real play, just to back up a minute, is OZ equity is the top layer of the capital stack. And so and it's an important piece of the capital stack, especially with the cost of debt and at private equity and so forth. The developer, whether he's working with the municipalities and they may have low income housing tax credits or LIHTC, new market, TIFs, DIFs, things like that. Those are all at the bottom of the capital stack. And so as you go up, you got the owner's equity, sponsor's equity, and then you've got a slug of OZ equity. So to your point, Jim, EB5 can come in. They're not going to get the benefit of the tax incentive. A foreign investor can come in. They will not get the benefit of the tax incentive, but they can invest in the deal. The investors that you're targeting, and this has been the cat and mouse game, and it's been highly weighted to institutional type capital raising, is how do you find an investor that's has realized a capital gain event, and that capital gain can come from, unlike or different from a 1031 exchange, was like kind real estate. A capital gain in the OZ space can come from selling stocks, bonds, crypto, art, you name it. And a big category, especially with the wealth transfer that everyone's talking about, is when business owners are selling and there's an exit. What are these business owners? I don't know personally what wealth management typically refers them to defer the capital gain. So this is one of the best choices and vehicles for an investor, a family office that's realizing a huge gain. You get into small gains, they might not be worth your while to do this. The structure is set up as a QOF and a QOZB. The QOF is typically the fund that brings in the OZ equity, and it pours down into the QOZB level, which is the real estate development or the business coming in. And as an investor, you have to designate that, file a tax form that's saying, you've got a capital gain and you're going to defer it into a QOF or a QOZB.
And I know Master will ask a question on that. But going on this, so it seems like it's for the larger, more capitalized, bigger players. Is it even possible for smaller players and brokers? Maybe the brokers can find the deals, but could they, put together their own OZ project, or is it just really for the big boys, and most agents and others are finding the LP money or OZ money, or they're actually just finding them the location within the territories, right? It's just a specialized niche for maybe
Yeah.
land developers, land people. They just understand this also.
Yeah. So that's a great question, Jim. And there is a cost benefit, analysis you look at. You look at the ticket size of OZ equity. I think this, you see some smaller check sizes, 25, 50,000, but really they're trying to get up to 100 minimum, maybe greater. And on an institutional level, it's, you're talking millions. The one thing I'd like to point out here, though, that's very interesting about this program is that if you're a 1031 investor or say a business owner that's realizing their own capital gain, you can set up a captive opportunity zone fund, meaning all you have to do is file the tax paperwork, and you can form your own QOF. Which, if you look at, let's just stay on OZ2. So say you recognize a gain first quarter 2027, your taxes are due, and you set up a QOF, and that gives you a deferral, number one, of 5 years. And then there's other regulations in there if you want to actually deploy your own capital into a deal. There's, some asset tests. Again, I won't get too far in the weeds. My kind of landscape is the middle market and the smaller investors. So I'd like to think that it's a benefit for everyone out there. And I think what I'll explain, the real juice in the deal is the 10-year hold. So, right now we're looking at existing QOFs and QOZBs that may have lost value since the inception because of the marketplace conditions. So that could be a challenge. But, the assumption is you're going to invest in an appreciating asset. And so you have to hold it for 10 years. And after a 10-year hold, there is no capital gain on the appreciation, and then there's no depreciation recapture. So with those two components of the legislation, when you put into your taxes or run a pro forma, you're seeing, IRRs that could be, 15 to 20%, or, there's a metric that they're higher, that your returns are higher than a traditional real estate investment because of the tax savings.
Yeah, one thing that some people are asking is QOF. Can you explain that acronym?
Yes, sorry. It stands for Qualified Opportunity Fund. So you have to set up the vehicle that's going to bring in the capital gain. And then the QOZB is the business, Qualified Opportunity Zone business. So you could set yourself up as a QOZB and go into another QOZB, which would mean a QOF is developing a sense, say a multifamily deal. You can go into that, but the structure starts at a QOF. That's the fund manager or the sponsor, and then they're raising that OZ capital to go down to the QOZB, the Qualified Opportunity Zone business, and that would be, it could be a data center, it could be a multifamily, a variety of real estate holdings. There's a few sin businesses, but that QOZB is the money that they use for the whole development of the project.
And Mike, can you do fund to fund? So if you set up a, QOZB, could you use that? Obviously, for your project, you may still have some extra. Can you fund to fund go to another fund, or will they not allow that? It needs to be kind of pure.
Yeah, so they were pushing in the legislation to create fund of funds, because the belief was that it would unlock more institutional capital into these projects. That didn't pass. So the closest the fund of fund, you're a QOZB, you can go into the QOF or the QOZB is the way I understand it.
And Mike, with this, where do you find it? Let's say from a very general, is there a federal government, state government that you can kind of go to just read in general what the federal or state government is proposing that people can read?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff on the Treasury and all the websites out there. I actually set up a Google search for anything opportunity zone, so I kind of have fun with that every day. Right now there's just everyone's publishing an article on the big beautiful bill and the benefit of opportunity zones, so that's been fun. I would say for people that are wherever they are located, probably one of the best places to start is, well, you can look on a map. There's a bunch of maps out there because you need to qualify the zones. But the best or the simplest way is to call up either the assessors or, I really network in the economic development community. Listen, their job is out there to attract businesses and development dollars, and they usually have other incentives that they're, deploying as well. So that's a unbelievable resource. You go top tier, and then you get to on the state level. This is all, it's a federal tax incentive, but it's all driven by the governors in the state level where these census tracts are going to be designated. So again, if you know of if you know you're in the path of progress and you got a comfort level that whether it's an existing zone or you anticipate it could become a new zone. I mean, that's an early entry point for a service provider to get into the conversation. And whether you're working with a sponsor or a business, to the reasons why, you'd want to locate in a zone and take advantage of the tax incentive.
Going on the tax incentive, I remember when I first heard about it, when it was just OZ, when it was passed, and we were talking to some Apple executives that liquidated stock that needed to put money to wash their
Yeah,
money 10 years. Then I went into the crypto where people were telling me, can we sell our crypto, put the money
yeah,
there? And they were just trying to figure out how to tax the crypto and monitor the crypto. So it's
correct.
interesting. So with that, it kind of applies the same way, but just like everything else, like the EB5 right now, it's evolved like OZ's tightened up, found the holes, found the things that didn't work, made things for why they wanted it to work, right? And not those kind of loopholes or just inefficiencies or fraud, right? That people were
Yeah.
committing. So what are you seeing? Is it still working for the large amount of money to use it, like you were saying, for the tax incentive to place those monies in certain areas, hopefully during for the path of progress. But is it still the crypto, these, as we see with IPOs and Figma and all these things, people putting money from that into it, or
Yeah.
is there others?
Well, there's others, and I think that I don't have the numbers or a range of numbers, but the stat is, kind of staggering that there's trillions of dollars of unrealized capital gains, and that's what everybody's trying to figure out. How do you tap into that? So that's where, and that marketplace is controlled more on a securities basis, and it's controlled through wealth advisors and family offices, right? So and that's a challenge, kind of down on the ground level where I'm at, is to how do you tap into that and break through? There's a lack of education, and this isn't a knock on the wealth management industries that they lose control of their clients' proceeds. So that's that's how they make their money. So but I think going into OZ2, there's just going to be a lot more education. That was the biggest problem before. And that's how I cut my teeth. I've got all the bruises and scars to, you know, talk about here. But now I'm like I'm in a good position because of all my sweat equity to try to, be a resource. That's ultimately what I'm trying to do, is be a resource, and serve and be involved in impactful projects. And there's a lot of them. What I've loved about it is just I've seen or been exposed to a lot of different businesses that are trying to change the world out there. And that just excites me when we can engage them in a conversation about opportunity zones.
That makes sense because when I was talking to some broker dealers, they were putting some OZs probably to keep the money in-house. And
Yeah,
that's why I was wondering, fund to fund, if they built the fund, they can deploy it in other funds so they still kind of have some sense of control rather than it leaving their assets under management and it just kind of disappears and you lose control, right? So are you starting
yeah.
to see with these, with let's say broker dealers of where people like RIAs and people registered that to keep assets under management, that they're kind of putting it in-house or some mechanism so they don't lose control? Because I know it could be great for their clients, but they may steer them away from it because they don't want their clients to go elsewhere and lock them up for 10 years.
Right.
And is there kind of these residual fees from it, or is it until completion of the project?
Yeah, let me back up on something, Jim, because first I'll say this, the disclaimer, I'm not giving tax advice or legal advice. And as service providers, you're talking about a securities here. So I'll just call myself a broker. I can't go out and raise capital. I can do a lot of things behind the scenes, but I cannot be compensated from a capital raising fee. And that's how broker dealers get compensated. The bigger developers use broker dealers in that network better than the smaller ones. The smaller sponsors don't have those resources, so you need to be compensated on a consultant advisory basis. The broker dealers, they typically, they get charged, they have a contract, and then their job is to go out across their network and try to raise capital. The thing that's critical for all of these deals, but in particular, you get into the broker deal world, is what's called a MIC report, and it's really the third party due diligence that these deals are credible, they're legal structure, and they're going to be compliant. That's a big challenge for smaller middle markets sponsors because they don't have those resources. So what's happened for me is I've been able to, like you can appreciate this, Jim. It's like the global chamber. There's a network of Opportunity Zone experts out there in different fields, tax, compliance, legal, that we kind of pool our resources together and help each other out. And so, I think the brokerage community it's been untapped. I think more brokers or service providers should really take a hard look at this. And, it's another quiver in your arrows there. And so, there's just this compliance line and securities line that you got to be careful about.
No, and definitely, I was licensed Series 7 and many of the other licenses needed. So
Yeah.
yes, stay compliant, stay good, because it was like the DST or the ticks. Is it a license? Is it this? Is it attorneys? EB5? Is it this? Is it that? So no, stay compliant. You don't want to definitely lose your license. Always talk to the expert third party, those that are registered reps, or the accountant, lawyers, right? We always CYA. I always say,
Yeah.
don't think you can do it yourself, and ChatGPT can't answer all your questions. So cover
Right.
yourself
No
with
doubt.
CYA, right? Because it's fun to
Yeah.
ask it all these questions and get some guidance or who to go to, but you don't want to do it all by yourself and everything. So Mike, another one before I open it up to guests is, how can they kind of be a consultant without raising funds and everything to add fees? Because we've talked before about valuing your time, being a consultant, putting all these pieces together, because that is some value in many of these, is where to go, putting some pieces together to really hire and contract you as a consultant, so you can put the broker dealer, maybe attorneys, CPAs, the right people, and somebody to even structure the fund for you so you can go do it depending on your licensing and capacity.
Yep. Yep. I look at it as really some traditional real estate brokerage skills come into play. You're just putting it in a different bucket. And places to look, or again, are just trying to identify if there's zones, in your community. I would call the economic development agencies. There's be opportunities to get hired by them on a consultant basis or even a list-in basis. I think, going back as an OZ1, there was a lot of listings that said, yeah, this project's in an opportunity zone, but the brokerage community just didn't understand what it really was and how perhaps to use it as a tactical advantage. The other part is, if you've got a business owner that's looking to expand, say a manufacturer, and if you can explain to them the benefits of OZs, then you could go site select in certain designated OZ areas. I think there's a lot of room in this space for, I use the word service provider, but I mean the dirty word is brokers, right? I think there's a lot of room. I wouldn't say like make it your full-time job or anything like I did, but there's just another angle for you to be involved. And I think that once you get exposed to it, you're gonna like, wow, this is pretty cool because you're doing impactful work most of the time, and that's what's really driving me. And it just opens you up to a different sphere of investors and other vendors out there that otherwise you wouldn't. And that's what, it creates change. It makes you study and learn to grow in your business.
Thank you, Mike. I know, Master, you had a question. Did he answer it, or do you have another question to maybe ask Mike?
Yeah, I know, Mike. Thank you for the
Good,
information.
Bessa.
So you did mention businesses, like, can you elaborate a little bit more on what type of businesses are you referring to? When it comes to
Sure.
those?
I mean, there have actually been there's a group out there that has actually focused on retail real estate. There's some nuances with you can't do a triple net lease, though. It has to be a double net. But I mean, I'm not going to say like a Forest is a candidate. I'm talking, maybe it's a hardware chain, and they're expanding. They're like, hey, I
Right.
want to go into these communities, or I'll give you a better example is a grocery store. This group I'm networking with, they want to go in and fill the gap in food deserts. And when you think of it just off the top of your head, those types of areas are typically would be in an opportunity zone. Of course, you got to find the right real estate too. So, that piece comes
Right.
into it. You really have to, the business from a business perspective, they get the same tax incentives. It's a 10-year hold, but they can expand to other sites within zones if that's what they want to do.
Okay, and my next question, you mentioned about like your state legislators or your governors. So like I do know some state legislators like from my district. So what you're saying is give them a call and ask them what designated zones are
Yeah, you're in
available.
South Carolina, right?
Yes, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, correct.
Yeah, so you should just call up Senator Scott.
Yeah, okay.
He was one of the pioneers to get this legislation put into law. But yeah, no,
Okay.
all joking aside, start with your town halls or your local economic development
Okay.
committees. Those are tremendous resources.
Okay. Thank you.
And Master, if you ever talk, let us know. Take a picture, share it, because I love the testimonial. See what you could accomplish. You just never know, right? Use some of
Yeah.
this
Right.
knowledge, see where it goes,
Yeah.
especially with somebody that influential. There's things that
Right.
you could accomplish. It would be curious to see what you could do there.
Yeah.
Let me actually give a good example because this one's so big. But Erie, Pennsylvania, they formed a fund that whatever they're called, the city or state. They formed a fund with Erie Insurance, and they brought in some impact investors as well, and they redeveloped the whole community, like it's a town down there. So it doesn't have to be just one small deal. It could be, you know, acres and acres of property, that needs development, and they spurred it. Like they're the ones that created their own fund.
Yeah, and why it's interesting if you're talking about the Carolinas. I've gone to, north and south to check it out. One of our friends and part of the company is bringing a lot of the Chinese foreign capital because of onshoring. It's increased it. Met with the governor and a lot of other high power because of the kind of the onshoring of, let's say, Chinese businesses that came by. But there's others, right? Usually, if there's a certain type of business, more people are coming. And just hearing these things, Mike, is the hardest thing is assembling the capital stack. Like you said, the OZ part, maybe top
Yep.
of the GP, the equity stack, then the LP money. But putting, for everyone out there, it's really putting the cost of funds at the lowest cost available is to match it up. And that's what everyone's trying to do with I always say the GP equity, which is the sponsor or your equity, right? You add others to it to get hopefully positive leverage. And the lowest part is the debt, right? The most secure is the debt on
Yeah.
everything. But a lot of times the math doesn't pencil out for people, especially for land development. There's no income coming out. So
Right.
you got to put it together or use collateral or a balance sheet to make the deal work. And sometimes raising OZ or EB5 or, I don't like to call it free money. It's not free money, but
Yeah.
it's cheaper money for just domestic equity, which is chasing certain returns, right? We all know where the return should be for the risk. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, right, Mike? When you're looking at where's the line, right? Where's par? Where's the 10-year treasury? Everything else kind of plays around it. So what's the kind of the maybe yield spread too that you see from using OZ money to, let's say, domestic US for a similar product type? If it's a multifamily or it's a multifamily with OZs, I mean, the deal has to stand alone. But on the equity part, what do you think the delta is?
I think it's between 5 to 15%.
Yeah,
That's
that's
an
big.
average range.
Yeah.
depending on the deal. I think, one thing that just came to mind I want to emphasize is, if you look at development pipelines, and I'll use multifamily because that was one of the, biggest asset classes, and it will continue to be one of the biggest asset classes. Right now, multifamily doesn't underwrite for all the reasons we've been talking about for, the last 2+ years. Most pencils are down. And there's been a lot of supply that still hasn't come online, but the expectation is that the absorption rate is going to be amplified, and then there'll be a supply balance problem. So if you think about a development pipeline, it usually takes you, 18 months, 2 years longer to, go through everything before you put a shovel in the ground. Well, that would line up pretty good right now with January 1st, 2027. And, we expect that, interest rates will be lower and inflation's down and, and like I said, there's trillions of dollars of unrealized capital gains too. So like when you, on that note, is an area to network is, well, who are the high net worth businesses in your own community? It could be, a company that's been established in your community for 50 years. There's going to be a generational wealth transfer, and there's going to be a capital gains event. And so when you get to those type of prospects, they'll get pretty excited about leaving for their legacy, and and the transfer of wealth management is to make impact in their community that they've operated out of their whole careers.
And Mike, one thing is, because we're talking so much about tax incentives, are there special CPAs or tax firms, right? Because it's all tax savings.
Yeah.
It's not always what you make, it's what you keep, right? That's the
Yeah.
return. So
Yeah.
are there special CPA tax firms that work on just OZ projects?
There are some specialized firms out there, but they're working on more institutional type projects. And I think that's an area where CPA and tax, they just didn't know enough about OZ1, and so they wouldn't refer their clients to it. And I think a lot of taxes were paid that could have been deferred. So that's a really good area to network, because there's if you don't know about OZ2 when it comes online, then your wealth manager or your CPA or tax is not doing you a good service by not being familiar and being able to present the numbers as an option.
Mike, maybe we put a course together for wealth managers, RIAs, broker-dealers, and CPAs. As you know, I'm connected with some of these different groups anyway. So, and it's good that you show up. Now I understand when you go to the Global Chamber, you're right. Most of that, and I just had a call with Doug, are economic development people, just tons of economic development part of Global Chamber.
Right.
So
yeah, Chamber of Commerce and economic. Absolutely. The other thing this isn't a plug, but because I was so adamant about there was a lack of education, I am starting, it's already started, but I'm really going to kick it off in September, as a OZ2 Alliance cohort. And it'd be for anyone that wants to learn about OZs. There's some really smart guys that I'm working with, and we're going to try to help educate the marketplace. That's our little effort here. So it's free. There's no charge. It's going to be on Thursdays at noontime, East Coast Standard Time. And if anyone wants to join, just reach out and we'll get you plugged in.
yeah, Mike, and if you can put your information too, and I'll let Master ask another question. So put your information, Mike, in it. And Master, what's your next question?
Yeah, it could be for you, James, or Mike. Reference to the consulting services, do you recommend just staying local to your market, or you can expand outside your market, or even though you might not know that market well, but if you got a connection, bring others in who know that market to provide those services as well?
Yeah, I think initially, Master, you want to stay local. And I mean, South
Okay.
Carolina's got enough opportunity zones, and Greenville's had there's a couple big projects going on in Greenville right now. So, there's usually enough work in your local market. That's where you want to kind of cut your teeth initially.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Just typing in my specs here.
Okay. And is there any other questions for Mike? Chris, do you have any question? McGee? Because I know you work on a lot of interesting, larger, big money projects.
Right. We actually have, I think it was the first fund, QOZ money for an aviation project, and it's been terrific.
Mhm.
So no, this has been great. It's got my juices flowing for here in North Carolina
You're
again.
in North
So,
Carolina? Sure. Another great state for OZs.
right. Terrific
I mean, I
stuff.
think I think like you referenced North Carolina is that you look at on the state level and what is the state trying to do to attract some of these big manufacturers? Like look at Intel out in Ohio. There's a big push for they haven't done this yet, but for military base conversions. I'm specifically speaking to a couple states about data centers. That's a big push. Look at the growing industries, look at what your community or state is known for, and get close or watch those groups and try to network with them.
Yeah.
You can be
And
the OZ, you can be the OZ guru in your state.
And Chris, that's why, when we saw each other in the Carolinas, North Carolina, Raleigh, Daniel is actually
oh,
bringing more business in. That's why I was wondering the China, how do you put it together? Local
oh,
partners, maybe working with them. But he's telling me some of the projects and everyone coming to the Carolinas, since he does, as you know, to have the support of the governors and everyone else, because
right.
they love the business coming in, and those entire industrial parks that they're building, it's going to be filled. I mean, just it's
Yeah.
crazy what's going to go on because of their
And,
open
and
arms.
Dan- And Daniel's crushing it, by the way. He's bringing in, that guy just goes. I love that guy. Glad I got to meet him. Yeah, and the business that North Carolina is attracting, what we've got in Greensboro now is net zero coming in and all the jet zero, sorry, all the jobs that they're going to be bringing up in that area for just the aviation piece, but then all of the data centers we're pushing so hard for. Digital Realty just doing that big project down outside of Charlotte, Amazon putting a lot of money in. Now Apple, the 600 billion that they're reshoring, not just Detroit, it looks like we're going to get some of that here in North Carolina too. So thanks, Mike. You've got me thinking of another arrow to put in the quiver.
Yeah, no, I'd love to stay in touch with you, Chris. I
I'll,
want
I'll
to point
reach
out
out.
something else. You might find some of these big groups not take advantage of setting up a QOF or a QOZB. They just might not. Some people just have so much money they don't. It's a blip on the radar. But if you're looking to expand within some master development, you can your business, or if you're a developer and you go in and buy something near the Amazon HQ or whatever, you can still set that up as a QOZB and get the tax
Oh,
benefits. So
wow.
we've seen a lot of that, especially through OZ1. These developers they didn't know what it was, they didn't trust it, and they just developed in these zones without taking advantage of the incentive. But you could go in there and set up your own QOZB if
Oh,
you wanted to.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely stay in touch. I'll reach out.
Yeah, you could, say there's like a manufacturer that's already been developed, it's been open a couple of years, and you see it's in a zone. There's no reason why you can't go into that zone and set up your own QOZB,
Wow, terrific.
QOF QOZB. Yep.
I do have a
Yeah, we'll
question,
definitely
Michael.
go ahead, Keith. Is that you,
Hey,
Keith?
Keith.
Yeah. Hi.
Hey.
On the second version, I may have missed you saying this or not saying this. I don't know. Are we going to see the governors sit down and revamp their OZs in their state?
Yes. Yes. And by the way, Keith, you're in Alabama, right? There's a gentleman down there who set up a OZ Alabama. Like
Yeah,
Alabama's really
he
pushed
he's
them
been
down
he's
there.
been he's been one of my speakers like twice in my
Sure.
last
Alex,
4 years.
right?
Yeah,
His name is
he's
Alex,
an
right?
attorney. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. So he's a huge, I mean, he's well known in the industry. So your question is yes. And, there's going to be a lot of lobbying with these governors and their OZs. because there's going to be less OZs all across the board, and so it's going to be more competitive. And the smart governors and states are going to get way ahead of this. You don't have to start picking until like this time next year, July, I believe it starts. But you know, the work that's going to go into it now, now's the time to be talking with people if you can.
Perfect. What about, because I know with another project I'm looking at is in Tennessee. So Max, I know you're in Tennessee, so maybe you have a question, or if you're part of this or understand from maybe in Tennessee, what's kind of going on, Mike, if you may know, because of just Nashville has been crazy ever since
Yep.
COVID, growing maybe to an annoyance of a lot of people because of what it's done. But I think also it's gone to Memphis and others, right, in Tennessee. It's not just the only.
Yep.
So where's the opportunity zones maybe in that? And Max, I don't know if you want to add something to this, but I have with a project I'm looking at, and I have to see on the OZ map or the new one,
Sure.
how big, but they own 60 acres, maybe something really massive, and they bought it a long time ago. Obviously unentitled, but the appreciation just of what's going on in Tennessee has made it just blow up.
I would speak in particular for Memphis, you know, with Elon Musk coming in and doing the XAI, and he purchased the former, I think, another Korean company that was here and put his factory out there. And as a result of that, you know, we have Dell and NVIDIA and all other companies. You mentioned the data centers. They come into Memphis and they investigate in that area, and you know, they bind a lot of those sites. And as a result, I think, you know, we may be in need of another designation, hopefully, you know, sometime soon for the market because of the lack of properties when all these people are finished with, because we have the Amazon here and XAI, and as a matter of fact, NVIDIA is already breaking ground and everything. So it's kind of getting really hot in this area in particular.
Yep. Yeah, no, Tennessee did a pretty good job promoting opportunity zones.
Yeah.
I can name the top 3 states that you know, attracted the most capital and projects: California, Texas, Florida. You know, you kind of look at, that's the other part, is you want to look at the states that have really embraced it. I'm out of Massachusetts. I don't feel like they did a good enough job. And I just spoke to someone that's going to be involved in the picking the next zone. So you do have to go where, you know, in my case, I do have to go. Most of the work I'm doing is outside of New England.
Yep.
Well, Max, we'll be talking because I'm going to take a look because we're trying to make the math, and you know, it could be a decent deal, but with the OZ money and Path of Progress and all the building, I have to see exactly with this, right? With a lot of research and diligence. So as we kind of close up, can you share how anyone can kind of follow it? And obviously the course, the mastermind you're putting together, and hopefully turning this into a certified course if you haven't already, and really building on this, because it does seem from just what we're hearing here, very exciting opportunities, but it's just people don't know. Sometimes their state is behind.
Right.
You know, how can they get this and just get better at this so they don't, or at least a quiver, so they have this extra, just like what I'm hearing right now. I think this could work for the Texas deal I'm looking at. Or sorry,
Sure.
the Tennessee.
I would Google the big beautiful bill and opportunity zones. There are so many new articles out there that really make it you know, very simple to understand you know, what OZ1 is and what OZ2 is. I mean, just Google it up because the information is so fresh out there. That's the easiest way. You know, is you got to do some self-education, but if you got specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out. There's some good, I've got a group, OZ group on LinkedIn. There's a lot of communication on LinkedIn, and I could refer you to other resources too to help educate people.
Mike, thank you. Max, you had another question.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of tax incentives also in here. They are really, really hot on that. We have a chamber of commerce that is very, very active, you know, in attracting all these kind of people in there. And not far away from Memphis, you know, there's another county next door to us that the Ford EV factory is be opening in 27 as a result of that. You know, I mean, they have the whole city basically developed, and they're building a lot of apartments, retail, and the rest of the stuff. I mean, huge opportunities in here, especially with the tax incentive that they have.
Yep, totally.
You know, I think this is the thing, it's just getting educated, tapping into this network. And Mike, like I said, we were talking a long time ago about this, but I think the time has come as
Yeah.
rates we feel will come down. Everyone hopes a 50 basis point, but hey, give us a 25 next month and hopefully some more, you know, good and bad, right? Hopefully with the lower rates, it's going to help spur it on, but not cause usually a trigger of the recession usually comes after the lower of interest rates after the spike. But it will create some momentum and movement. And a lot of people did make money on assets, digital assets, and the stock market. So it would be good, as Mike, we'll probably bring you back again and share more and with the different groups to have you talk, especially Global Chamber and other groups, because it is building the community. You can't do it alone. You need more outreach and networks to really plug into everybody and build a team to execute the deal and the fund. So Mike, again,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, I would just in closing, Jim, I would say that there's not a lot of situations in our, you know, in our industry where you've got a runway like you do here to kind of, you know, educate yourself and try to position yourself as an expert, because it's not going to go into effect until 2027. You know, there's this, we call this the gap period right now. And so the anticipation right now through 2026, it'll be slower capital raising, but people will still have capital gains they got to, and you know, deploy. And what I think the bigger issue as it closes to 2026 is compliance and reporting. You know, there's going to be the OZ 2.0. There's going to be a real tight compliance and reporting requirements that we didn't have in OZ1. So my concern is that there's a lot of OZ1 deals that might not be in compliance. So there's some real consultant opportunities there as well.
Mike, again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays. Please reach out to Mike to learn more and join us every week for cutting edge updates, ideas, concepts, so you could apply it to your business. Everyone have a great day and see everyone again next week, Wednesday. Thank you so much, everyone.